All right, well, it is 9 o'clock, so we can start this. We will start the webinar. I know people will come in as we are talking, and that is great. Today we're going to be talking about student engagement strategies, high quality feedback to increase achievement. So that is our topic of today. I am Alana Harvith.
I am Jessica Benhack.
So we are both going to kind of tag team this and kind of do a co-teaching. I will be doing the first part of it, and Jessica will be doing the second part of it, and she will jump in if I forget something, and I'll jump in if she does too. So we are going to start. It's about 9 o'clock, so we want to just make sure that we are right on time with you.
One thing, we do not have a closed captioner person to do this webinar, but you guys can choose that in your settings if you need to turn that on. But reach out if there's any questions or concerns.
And we are in a webinar format, so we can't see you guys, but we can get to your chat and to your questions. So we're going to try to make this as interactive. This isn't an interactive, this is an engagement PD. We want to hear from you. So we recognize that is a little hard in a webinar form, but we are going to do our best to make sure we get some interactions from you guys too. So just that caveat. Okay, so who are we? We are the IEP Resource Center. We are a state-funded grant through the Indiana Department of Education. Our purpose of the center is to increase knowledge, skills, and capacity of Indiana educators to improve outcomes for students with disabilities. Because we know that when we improve outcomes with students with disabilities, we're going to improve outcomes for all students. We want to promote inclusive education, and we do think it's a shared responsibility and to get equitable access with a strong core curriculum, high quality instruction benefiting all students. So we do believe that all students benefit from inclusive education. So that is kind of our mission at the center. So we're going to move on. While we are talking about ourselves, I kind of wanted to go to this slide for you so that you can answer some of these questions in the chat if you wouldn't mind. Any of these things, your role at the school that you are in, if you're in a school, what's one goal that you have for the school year? What's one way you are building relationships this year? What is one of your stretches? We don't like to say weaknesses, we like to say stretches, so maybe something you need to improve on. And one of your strengths. You don't have to answer all of these questions. You don't have to answer any, but it would be nice so that we can kind of get to know you a little bit. You can think about this while we're talking about our background a little bit, and you can utilize the chat. So thank you. I'm just gonna give you some processing time for a second. And then I'm gonna let you guys chat while we're talking about who we are first. So my name is Alana Harvith. I do have special education background, 17 years in the classroom. After I got my admin license and went out for a case manager kind of position. These are my kiddos right here. I have a 10 and a 4-year-old and a dog that's 12. I went to IU in Bloomington. I like to travel. I currently am going to Indiana State University to get my EDS. So that's a little bit about me. I have background in co-teaching and lots of things. I taught applied skills and mild disabilities as well. So that is kind of my background. I'm going to let Jessica talk about her, and you guys can use that chat to introduce yourselves to us while we're talking.
Hi, my name is Jessica Benhack. I started at the IEP Resource Center in October, so coming up on a year. My background is special education. I have my master's in education in dual certification with gen ed and special education. And then I have another master's in building level leadership. I have been in the school since 2007, but in working since like 2008. I started my career in Chicago public schools and then moved back down to Indianapolis to be closer to family. I really love traveling, similar to Alana. The Indy 500 is my favorite thing. So yeah, that is about it. But my background is mostly a lot of behavior and moving into more MTSS and that type of stuff too. So kind of a juggling or wearing lots of different hats. So yeah, drop into the chat what if not wanting to share what your stretches or strengths, if you could just let us know what your role in your building is, that would be great.
Yes. I don't know if I can you see anything in the chat yet or not yet?
No.
Yeah. Someone's raising their hand, which I like. Maybe they can't write in the chat.
Hi, Lormar, you can just go ahead and talk. I've let you
I
talk.
think no, but you're not seeing anything because the chat says disabled.
It's disabled.
Oh, no, that is unfortunate. So if you guys just want to raise your hand, Lormar, you can share what your role is. Lormar, do you want to share what your role is?
I'm a resource teacher at Forest Glen Spanish Immersion School in Lawrence.
All right. Thank you, Lormar.
Well, that's not good.
Yeah. Abby, would you like to share what your role is? I've unmuted you if you, or raise your hand if you guys would like to share.
Or can we do question and answer? Is that available?
Yeah.
So they can they write in that?
Yeah.
We apologize for that. It's the webinar is harder with we're trying to get some engagement, but it's a little bit harder.
I think they can use the question and answer.
If you can just put it as a question, kind of what your role is. If not, that's okay too. And we don't have to have you guys answer. I'm sorry about that. We'll fix that for next time. But if you want to try it, that would be great. And if not, that's okay too. But we just like to think about these kind of like as we're getting into our work. What are your stretches? What are your strengths? And even you thinking about it to yourself is helpful to kind of ground us to do our work today. So we like to just ask some of those kind of questions. We do have a Padlet. So if you have your phone, you can use it like your camera, you can turn it on and you get the presentation slides that we have today. We also have handouts, guided notes and resources. Jessica did send an email out yesterday with whoever was coming today. You have guided notes. So if you wanted to print those off and kind of go along with us, that's great. If not, that's great too. Some people like to learn that way. So we gave you some guided notes. You could have an engagement strategy. So that is our first engagement strategy. Having students make sure that they have guided notes so that they can take some notes if they want. And some adult learners like to learn like that. So we wanted to do that for you guys. So you should have gotten that email. Hopefully you have it. There is a question and an answer right here. Thank you, Tony, 6th grade math science teacher. Appreciate that. Jened, I'm assuming.
Or are you getting chats?
I'm getting question and answers.
Oh, perfect. Okay, great.
So I got Tony Merritt. He's a 6th grade math science teacher.
Wonderful.
So if you want to utilize that question and answer, you can.
Please do.
Sorry. Please do. Sorry about that. So you should have those notes if you want them to go along with the presentation today. We have resources, we have research. All of those things are in the Padlet. You can look at that at your own time, maybe with your team if you want to do that. And we have our handouts in there. So let us know if you cannot find that, but you can give that a question and answer as well. Just anything's going to go in that Q&A today. So our objectives today, we're going to understand the purpose of engagement and why it matters. Understand the connection between OTRs and feedback. Provide a handful of strategies to implement in your own classroom. And we're going to reflect on your current practices and set a goal to increase student engagement. So after this 90-minute webinar, hopefully that we will answer all of these. These are our objectives of the day.
No sound.
No sound?
Yeah.
All right. Well, this lady is saying boring. Have any of you guys?
She's on
really
Killing
loud.
Eve. No, she's on Killing Eve. This is how, yeah, go ahead, Alana. Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. So she's really, really loud and she's just screaming like boring. So has anybody ever heard that before in their classes? Anybody at all heard a kid say boring? You can put that in the Q&A. You can give me a thumbs up. You can give me an emoji, whatever you can do. Hi, Angela. She's a special education teacher in Gary, Indiana. One of her goals this year is to grow my students in the area of math. That's great. I live in Hobart, so I'm up by you. So awesome. Thank you, Angela, for answering that. But has anybody, I mean, I was a middle school teacher, so I never heard that kids said anything was boring that I said. But anyway, so if you have ever heard that before, you can always engage with us in the Q&A, please, you're in the right spot. So we definitely have heard this before. So why are students saying this? We're going to try to tackle this. All right. So how are we going to engage students? So instruction needs to be explicit. Students must understand the why they are learning something. So before they can learn the what, they need to know the purpose or the why. That's brain science. It's been research-based. You have to have a why connection to your learning. The ability of the students to be engaged as an active learner. So students cannot just be receptacles of knowledge, meaning we cannot just lecture all day and have them just take in that knowledge. They have to be actively engaged, and we are the ones that have to make sure that they are actively engaged as teachers. Students must have the opportunity to receive feedback on their performance. Jessica's going to talk about feedback later, but it's going to be largely positive. It builds student confidence and increases the probability of success. So you have to have that immediate feedback in order to move your learning to the next level. So all of those things are how we are going to engage our students, and we're going to talk about those. So what is the purpose? What is the why? Why are we talking about this today? Well, if you have increasing engagement, you're going to have increased academic achievement. It's research-based. You're going to have improved behavior because students are not going to be bothering their classmates as much because they're going to be engaged in your lesson. Mental wellness will be better. Students are working in groups, so they have to learn how to work with each other. So that will improve as well because you're going to teach how to do that. Equitable access. All of your students need to be heard. If you're only calling on the same couple of students, it's really not equitable. So in order to understand and to give them all access to the curriculum, you need to make sure that everybody's able to answer your questions. So that's part of the why. Research supports the importance of opportunities to respond and feedback. So there is a big correlation of underachieving schools and not having students as engaged, and schools that are really doing well, the research says that they engage more with their teacher and more with the material. So the better you do that, better that your school will do and your classroom will do.
Alana, really quick, the chat is working now. I'm going to say that I made the magic happen, but I'm not sure what's up, but feel free to use the chat, guys. Throw your questions and stuff in there and let us know, and we're happy to answer and help.
Well, that's perfect because right now we're talking about student motivation and morale. So I wanted you to utilize the chat and ask you guys, what do you think about your student motivation and morale? How is the year going? Is your kids motivated this year? Do you think, or how about post-COVID, or how do you want to word this, Jessica? How do we think our motivation and morale is?
Well, in general, like if you compare your students' motivation and morale prior to COVID, how would you say like it's changed since COVID, or even during the last like 2 school years? How has your students' motivation and morale changed? Like, has it gotten better? Has it gotten worse? Just drop the chat.
Yeah, what do you guys think? I'm going to give you a second to just think about that. Do you see good motivation right now, or do you think it's harder to engage them, or not? Maybe you don't see any change at all about their student motivation. Do you think that they're eager to work and learn?
Laura Mar says that it's been really hard. So it sounds like they're a little less motivated. Maybe their morale is a little bit lower.
Okay. Yeah, we kind of were talking to some teachers, and some people are saying this year is a little bit better, but last year was really, really rough. It was really hard to get them engaged. So I'm not sure, I guess it's a little bit early in the school year this year to see what the motivation and morale is, or maybe sustain that motivation during the school year. But people were seeing lower motivation last year, like in general, a lot of teachers that we were talking to. So I'm not sure if that's what you see in your school right now, if you have pretty good high motivation and morale, but we're just kind of thinking about that as an engagement.
Well, Tony says that motivation and morale this year is much better than last year. Last year was very difficult.
I heard that. I
Yeah.
heard that too. I actually heard that yesterday in one of my classes. A lot of the superintendents were saying overall the kids are a lot better this year than last year.
And Angela says that she feels like students are very happy to be in school. They want to be there, and she feels that students are less motivated because they are so far behind. And I think that this year feels a little bit like the most normal start to the year that we've had in a while. So it feels a little better and normal to come back to, but that totally makes sense that your kids are like, ooh, not as motivated, or the morale's a little bit lower because it does seem harder. Stacy noted that she also thinks they're excited to be in school, but COVID has really impacted them academically, and they're having a hard time giving up. So it's really great that you guys are on this training, because engagement leads, and like high quality feedback really leads to high achievement, not just in academics, but behavioral, mental wellness, all of those areas. So getting some of these tips and strategies hopefully will help bring up the morale. Talking about that, so your experiences that you guys shared about how your kids seem less motivated, or the morale is a little bit lower, definitely correlates with connects with what the rest of the country also saw. Edweek did this study in 2021 about student motivation and morale of that school year. And so students reported that they were like 50% less motivated, but teachers viewed them as 87% less motivated than previous years. Would you guys just let me know in the chat if you'd also agree with these things as well? And then with morale, students said that they were about 49% less. Their morale was lower than it was in previous years, but teachers saw that it was like 82% less. So their perception of school is different from the teachers, but you know, our kids and being self-aware. But teachers, you guys are in the trenches every single day working with those kiddos, and the motivation and morale definitely impacts how kids are connecting with learning, connecting with their school community, and how they're approaching their education. So students are seen as much more passive, a lesser sense of social belonging, and feeling more disengaged than they have in years past. But it really sounds like they're excited to be there. So there's so much to grab onto with just that one piece to hopefully bring up that morale and motivation.
So we want to ask your feedback in the chat. We're talking about OTRs, opportunities to respond. If you're a 0, you haven't heard of OTRs at all, you can just put a 0. And if you're a 5, I'm an expert on the topic, know the research and how to implement them, that's a 5. So this is a cell phone bar. You could use this with your own students. You ask them a question, and then 0 is you've not heard of it at all, you have no bars. And 5 is you have full bars. So you have 5, you put it in front of your chest so that nobody else can see it. You can put a 4, you can put a 3, you can put a 2 or a 1. Some people skip the 1 because you don't know which finger they'll go up. So they just go like 2, 3, 4, 5. But you could do any topic with this. This is just a rating scale, but kids know cell phones, so they know what bars mean, they know what that is. So 0 is literally I have no bars, I have no service. And 5 is I know everything about this topic, whatever topic it is. But for today, I want you guys to put in the chat, what about OTRs and your engagement strategies? How familiar are you with them? 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. If you could just put that in the chat for us so we know kind of where we're going. This is like a pre-assessment. Thank you. And you could use this chart kind of for any kind of thing that you're doing. I've seen it in math classrooms. I've seen it in science classrooms. So it is a strategy to engage students and to kind of pre-assess them really quickly.
I love this one because it's a nonverbal one, but also can be very private. So it could be like, they could just say 0 or they could say 5, but then it can be private of 0 or 5 here. And you as the teacher can kind of do that quick assessment around the room, and they're able to share without feeling like all the other students see how
Are looking at
they're at. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thanks for that, for your chat. It's a pre-assessment. You can look really quickly. It's cell phone, so it's relevant and connected to their lives, because all kids know if they have no bars, they're in trouble, right? And so our job today in our training is to get you from whatever bar you're at and maybe make it one step higher. So that is kind of like, for us, that's what we would do for a pre-assessment. We noted that in the chat, that it was a good way to gauge the students' learning. So yeah,
All right.
so do that.
Yeah, so there's a range. We have all the way from not familiar to know what it is and use it sometimes. So this is great. There's a lot of opportunities to learn in this.
Yes. So the people that are a little bit more familiar, please jump in and add kind of what you do too, if you have something different. All right, so equitable access, I kind of talked about this a little bit, but it's the feedback or the bridge the gap between students' current levels of understanding and their learning goals. So research, especially in math and performance of Black and Latino students, have linked the greater the engagement, the greater success for these populations. So truly low socioeconomic backgrounds and students of color really have to engage more, have to have more engagement in the material. The research just says that that's what has to happen for them to get to improve on their outcomes. So it's really important for us to have everybody be able to have everybody respond to the curriculum and be able to have their voice heard in our classroom, because it does like level the playing field for our students of color and low social economic background. So this is definitely research based. It's a way to close your achievement gaps. So using these engagement strategies do lead to better performance, and the research does back that up. That's just kind of why we have that here. We have a little clip from, oh gosh, I hope this is, Jessica, I hope this works.
I know.
Okay. We have a video and we wanted to play it, and it worked before, so I'm not quite sure why it's not working in our webinar format. But he kind of talks about why things do not work in a database problem solving way in order to how we can engage students in a different way of thinking. But I'm gonna see. Oh, maybe it will work if I put it on YouTube.
Yeah, make sure your volume is up. So hopefully that works.
It's 100.
Yeah. Nope. This worked last time, guys. Sorry about that.
Technology, it's frustrating. All right, so he talks about, okay, I'm just gonna explain it. So he talks about having these students in his class. He's a counselor in Brooklyn, and one spring there was 12 kids that got suspended, and he was like, okay, why did they get suspended? He wanted to like solve this problem in a little different way. So of those 12 students, I think 9 of them were of color. They were either, he says, Black or brown students. So 9 out of 12 were getting in trouble for, and they were, and he was trying to see, like, is this equitable? Is this equitable access? So basically he looked at the research, and instead of saying like these students just got in trouble because those kids are bad kids and those kids just always get in trouble, he looked to see when they got in trouble. He looked at the data and he saw that they got in trouble in a social studies class. Well, their math class and their reading class and their practical arts classes were hands-on classes. Their social studies class was 50 minutes of lecture, basically. So he deduced that these kids cannot sit and just listen for 50 minutes of this lecture. They all got suspended. Not the same social studies class. It was actually a different social studies class. It was 6th through 8th grade. But he sat down with the principal and he said, okay, how can we restructure this class so that our students are more engaged? Not these kids got in trouble and these kids are suspended because they're bad kids. How can we look at this differently? Because they were doing fine in the reading classes. They were doing fine in the math classes, the hands-on classes. This class that they sit and lecture a lot, was really hard for these kids. So they had to look at that engagement piece and they had to change it. So he talks about how that would be equitable access for all students. He could have easily just said, these kids are just those bad kids. They're just bad. They get in trouble. But he really wanted to look at, he's like, we are kind people at my school. I don't think we are doing anything, just suspending these kids because of, what their background is. So he looked deeper and they problem solved it. And then they changed the social studies curriculum to make it more hands-on, and they had less behavior problems. So that's basically what he's saying, way more eloquently than I did, but I hope that I kind of did the message that what he was talking about, and think about that. Let's see, something in the chat.
Well, I think with this one, when we talk about, like, Cornelius kind of talks about those obstacles that we come around, where you touched on it with, like, we are all kind people. We're not doing this purposefully, that these like 7 kids are getting suspended all the time and we're not purposefully doing these pieces, but we're also as educators having to reflect back on our own practices of like, how do we change that social studies class so it meets their needs? But you know, we have a lot on our shoulders. Like you guys are in the trenches every day. So it's like, is there enough time for us to show those to provide those OTRs? You guys are just saying earlier that a lot of the kids are behind. So you're trying to.
Are you frozen? Can you hear me? I think Jessica got frozen, but can you hear me? Yes, you guys are in the trenches and you are doing all of those things. Can somebody tell me if you can hear me? I think that Jessica might be frozen, but okay, thank you. All right, sorry. All right, so I'm going to continue. Yes, thank you. I appreciate you guys. So yeah, she is talking about that, and then it is a lot. It was a lot of work, for sure. But I just liked how his point was. They're talking about it's not. Let's look at ourselves first to see if we can just not make it harder. Look at our lesson plans and change our lesson plans to engage and put a little bit more engagement in those lesson plans. So that's really his point. I really liked what he was like what he was saying, and I'm sorry that we couldn't watch that video. It was really good. It's a really good one, but it is what he's saying because it's a great conversation. I teach a class and my students really liked it too, and it's just he's just a really great person. So what are OTRs? So some of you guys have said that you kind of heard of it, and some of you guys say you use them sometimes, and some of you said that you don't know. So what is an OTR? An OTR is a curriculum-related opportunity for students to be actively engaged in the lesson. The teacher has to provide a specific opportunity for students to respond in a physical manner, either verbalizing, a gesture, or create something. So that's an OTR. Anytime that the teacher gives a curriculum-related question and the student is able to answer either verbally, with a gesture, or create something, that is an opportunity to respond. Why are they important? Well, there's a huge research base behind it that you need to have OTRs so students, you can gauge their learning, like somebody said in the chat, but all the kids need to have their voice heard. They need to make sure that they're important in your classroom. So it's really important to make sure that they are engaging in your lesson. How do you use them? You need to plan them. You need to have wait time. You need to teach them very specifically. And I'm going to give you an example of that. You're going to provide opportunities to practice them. So you're going to use them all the time. You're not going to just use them a couple times. You're going to really practice with them, and you don't have to practice with academics. You can practice with your relationship building activities that you're doing in your classroom, and we're going to talk about that. They also provide opportunities for feedback. So when you're letting students respond, you're able to give them high quality academic feedback right after they respond to you. So those things are really important. And you can differentiate questioning in your classroom based on your students' needs. So you can differentiate your OTRs based on your needs of your kids. If you know some of your students need a lot more, like they only can be in groups of 2 people and for a very short time, that's okay. Some of your other kids can maybe handle being in a group of 4 for a little bit longer. You're going to have to gauge what OTRs you use with your students. So that's all those things to consider when planning and OTRs and what they are. So these are some OTRs. Have you guys chat? Tell me what you guys have used. Tell me what you guys have a question about. If you do have a question about anything, so maybe we can explain it a little bit better. But there's nonverbal, which works really well with the EL students who are learning the language, guided notes, stop and jot, hand signals, response cards. Now, I think the response cards are amazing for students with EL. I've seen it wonderfully, but I've seen it also with high school students. You have a red card and a green card. You agree with the green, you put the green up in a math class, a science class, it doesn't matter. Whatever your answer is, after you model, and then who agrees with me, put the green card up. Everyone puts the green card up. Who doesn't agree with me, put the red card up. You know what they don't have? They don't have yellow, because that's I don't know. So kids have to pick either red or green. Like there's no other like I don't know. You have to make a choice. And then you can see really quickly. I've seen it work really nicely in that. So that's what a response card would be. Yeah, please put in the chat what you know and what you already use. Think, pair, share. So you would need to stop and think. You need to write down something. You can either jot down what your answer is, and then you're going to share it with your partner, and then you're going to share it out. Wait time before the jot down needs to be happening so that all kids have an opportunity to answer the question. Whip around strategy. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. Flow of responses. You use that a lot in Spanish class. Repeat after me, and then they repeat. The whole class repeats. The teams are like snowball, stations, four corners, gallery walk, cued retell, number heads together. Jessica, do you see anything in the chat? I'm talking.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I kicked off a minute ago, so I was still on mute. Is it Kalea? I might be saying that wrong, and I apologize if I am. But nonverbal, she says nonverbal hand signals work great. She's also used the red and green cups instead of cards. And they have those on their desk during instruction that she could use for like similar. Oh, I was correct on your name. Great. Yeah, so I love that with the too.
I always use it also for like if you need help or you don't need help. Put the red down if you need help, and then you can walk around and see really quick the kids that need help, and green if they got it. I've also seen where you put it on the board like a cue, and the kids can go up and sign their names, and you just go up and see who needs help, and then you erase it when they go. The kids get a little bit of a movement break because they can walk to the board, write their names, and go back and sit down and wait, and then you go and help them when they need to. So that's another way that they can respond. You can respond to them in a good fashion. So yes, cups, awesome. All right, so those are OTRs. These are the strategies that you should be using in your classroom during instruction. Research says like about 5 or 6 first couple minutes of OTR strategies really get the kids engaged. I have a video to show what that looks like. You're gonna probably have to look at it in your Padlet because it's obviously it's not working. I don't know why, but it's not working, but it's a great, I'm going to just show it to you. It's Dr. Terrence Scott. He has a classroom and he shows you what it looks like to use 6 OTRs in a minute. We're not good. We can't watch it because it's not, there's no sound, but you have it in your Padlet. So I want you guys to go back and look at it because I really think that once you see what it is, and it's helpful to see somebody using it in action. I think it's helpful. I'm a visual learner. So he's right here. He's wonderful. He has a lot of research on opportunities to respond, and it is a quick 2-minute video, and he counts how many he uses. He uses whole class, he uses individual, and he shows you how you really can use all of that pretty quickly in your classroom and change up what you're doing now. So it's not gonna let you work. Right, then we can't. Yeah. All right, so how do I implement OTRs? When and where? Data, plan, choose carefully. So you're gonna look at your lesson plans and you're gonna see, when do you let the students respond? Do you only use a couple kids at a time? Do you model the question and then only have a couple kids respond? Are you using dry erase boards and letting everybody respond before answering questions? Are you only just asking a few couple kids? Are you using popsicle sticks and like randomly picking them out, which is great, but then when you put them back in, the kids aren't on their toes again because they're kind of know that you already asked the question. So are you having like a lot of mixed pairs? Are you letting them work in groups? Are you letting them like use dry erase markers? Are you letting them all write down something before and then share it out? Are you changing it up? So look at your lesson plans and see how you can engage all of your students, and that would be your challenge, more often. So that's what I would do. My first step of how do I implement the OTRs? I take my lesson plan and I decide every time it says teacher does, how do I change that to students will? Jessica, do you have a comment?
Not at the moment.
Okay.
It does seem like a lot. I do, but no, it does seem like a lot to put into your lesson plans, especially if you're really new to it, or even if you're just kind of like teaching yourself how to put it in there. But it's important to remember that you don't have to use all of them at once. Like you can pick one and work on it from there. Yes, it's in the slideshow. You can pick one and work on it from there, but remembering that we were just with Christina Dubé the other night, she was talking about differentiation and grouping, that with grouping you can start small. Like it doesn't have to be 4 kids. It could just be like 2 kids. And then your kids, once they get to that routine and they can handle that, conversation piece, you can add more pieces or more kids to it, and more moving around the room or things that are needed. But starting small and picking one or two is really important in this process.
Yes, and teaching the students the steps and the tasks very specifically is very important as well. Even when you do a group of 2 people, you say the person on the right is going to share first for 30 seconds. Then you're going to say, okay, 30 seconds is over. This person on the left is going to go next. So even making sure, breaking it down to who's sharing first, who's sharing second, the smallest steps are super important when you have those procedurals with groups. There's another in the chat. Oh, thank you, Jessica. You put the link in the Padlet. Yeah. All right, so I'm going to have you have some engagement here. I'm going to ask you guys to see if we can add some OTRs to this. So I'm going to have you guys read this. And when you, if you're thinking about adding OTRs, how could Mr. Sanchez kind of change his lesson plan? And we're asking you to look at your lesson plan to do that. You can put your thoughts in the chat of how he could increase his OTRs with this lesson.
You know what, Alana, I'm gonna just give them that they're allowed to talk. So you guys are more than welcome to just kind of, we can have a conversational piece. So you're all allowed to talk, and we can just kind of talk about, what you think about this activity and how.
Yeah, whatever you feel comfortable. If you want to use a chat, please use a chat. If you want to talk, please talk. We want to give you guys choices because choice is the friend of inclusion. So that means that you should have choices. We do not, whatever you feel like you want to do. So yes, please talk if you'd like to. If anybody has an idea, they can chat it, they can talk it out.
So we're giving you wait time. Which
it's awkward important. Sometimes.
Yeah, it's hard sometimes.
But this is what you should do in your class. Like instead of just saying it and then giving an answer, like the awkward wait time is super important and it's research-based to give people time to think. So it's totally fine.
So if you can share like 1 or 2 ways that he can increase engagement, either in the chat or feel free to unmute and you can share.
So that you can go back to your lessons and think about the ways that you can change your lesson plans a little bit and do different engagement strategies with that. There's no right or wrong answer either. There's not, so you can do engagement in tons of different ways, use different OTRs.
Kalea, which I still hope I'm saying that correctly, said she would use the dry erase boards or create teams of students to answer questions. We love that. Would it be helpful for us to go back to the nonverbal, verbal, and groups slide so you guys would have some examples to go off of? Why don't you switch back to that one? There we go. Alana, what would you do to increase engagement for Mr. Sanchez's classroom?
So everybody has, okay, so I do think that we should, I think that it's great that you can use a lot of different things. I would do responses, response cards, or I would do like the cell phone bar, or I would do thumbs up, thumbs down. I would just make sure that everybody gets a voice all the time, that everybody has to be paying attention. That's a way that you could ensure that everyone's paying attention. I know that maybe do some explicit teaching of those things. They said a dry erase boards, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
I think those are all really great. And then also looking at how the kids, like there are kids that want to, they yell out, so it may not be the most appropriate way to participate in the conversation. So going back and building those procedures around that, but giving them the opportunity to work with a partner or share that way. Or, verbally share. Oh, Angela's got one, maybe incorporate a think, pair, share. Hold all this accountable 4 corners to get them up and moving, do a quick assessment. Those are great ones as well.
Yeah, I definitely think if they're shouting out, then they want to be heard, the kids usually. So let's make that stretch, because that's kind of like something that we need to work on and contain and harness, and do it in a way, like you said, Jessica, and a little bit more managing, which they can shout out, but they can shout out to their partner, but making sure that you have those group roles, like, okay, that person gets to answer, because sometimes one of them's more dominating than the other person, but the other person gets to answer too, and they can talk together. So yes, definitely. So I've seen this in a classroom a lot. This is kind of like not, abnormal to kind of model for a little bit too long, and then the kids aren't really getting, and then you just ask a couple of kids for answers. So really thinking about when you're doing that in your classroom, how can you switch that up to have all the kids more engaged? So thanks for that. Thanks for your guys' thoughts on that. So just thinking about your own content, I know this is just an activity. That's kind of why we did it. So you can get your brain and shifting into thinking about that with your lesson plan. So that's what we already kind of talked about groups. This is how you can do groups, making sure they all know their roles, responsibilities, and group expectations. So everybody should have, a role in their groups. All students participating in groups are held accountable. I would have like a reflection sheet at the end of your grouping, and then say, was I a good group member today? Why or why not? It's kind of like that reflective piece. Setting goals for your group. Like my group's we're going to get 80% on this project, or we're going to get half of this project done. So making that consensus building part of your grouping and having those kids set those norms with them. It's just really great for community and relationship building. Making sure that you use data to vary your groups. Your group should be flexible. They should not be fixed groups. The same students should not be working together all the time. Just because a student has some difficulties with learning, they shouldn't always be in the same kind of a group. So really having those flexible groups, not static groups, is important. And making sure that kids are able to work with all the different types of people. I know sometimes it's hard for the kids to work together because they have a hard time working together, but if you just maybe for 5 minutes, try them in a group. So just gauging what your classroom can do, and it is really a great way to learn different things from them, because their personalities are different with different people. So it's really, I know I worked in middle school, and the teachers that did it really well, it worked really well, these things. So I encourage you to try it if you don't try it as much. So yes, sharing a partner and discussing how to solve them and exchanging ideas. That's great. That's perfect. So that would be like, they have a focus, they have something that they have to do, when it's done, when, and nobody can hide in your groups. We always would say nobody can be a hider in your group. So that would be like really important for your groups. I've seen groups work really well, and I've seen groups have a hard time. And the people that do it really well really break down that task. They practice all the time, these groups, not just they try it once and it doesn't go well, and then they just put it away. No, you have to keep trying it. I promise it will work. So I'm just giving you that little push. And I've seen some of these people in the chat said that they use grouping. So I appreciate that. We're going to skip that. We're going to go with Jessica.
All right, guys. So we're jumping into the second part of the presentation. And this is all about feedback. So we paired engagement, OTRs and feedback together because they kind of work really well together. Opportunities to respond provides opportunities for feedback, but feedback is important for academic behavior, mental wellness, and working with your kids and understanding their learning. And OTRs do the same thing. So in the chat, or you guys can unmute yourself, I'll give you a few seconds to think, but what is feedback and how do you use it in your classroom? If we were in person, we would do a gallery walk and take you guys all around, but I'm going to give you a little bit of time to think about, what is feedback and how do you use it in the classroom? Wait time.
Jessica and I have done this presentation in person, so we have a lot more engagement when you're here. We're trying virtually. I know it's harder, but we're doing our best with that. So sorry, but we normally are in person and we do posters and walk around. Things like Does anybody know the purpose of feedback or how you use feedback in your classroom? There's no right or wrong answer. There's lots of different, I mean, there's definition of feedback that is good, better, but I'm sure that people have different ways that they use it.
Kalea uses exit tickets, journaling after a lesson, sharing what they've learned with a partner. Those are really good pieces for just like checking their understanding and just seeing where their brain is moving. I think those are wonderful too. I kind of, because behavior is my background, I kind of go to behavior immediately, and we're just thinking about those like corrections or like positive praise. That's all feedback too. So how you're responding to a student's like behavior, or how are you guiding them through a thought process? Tony uses those exit tickets as well. So that's a good way to assess their learning after you provide a lesson. But feedback is, so OTRs are during instruction, which is, and then you'll use an exit ticket to assess later. But feedback is kind of like a little bit of that working process. So if you're using an exit ticket, if it provides an opportunity for you to be able to check and provide immediate feedback, and we'll get to that later, that's even better. But exit tickets, you can come back to the next day and provide more feedback. All right, next. Alana's got control of the slides on this one. Go ahead, if you've got more ideas, you can continue to put them in the chat. So the reason why feedback is so great is that it increases that motivation, which we talked about is really important earlier, engagement, which we've been talking about, and independence. I think a lot of us have noticed that over time, our kids, especially through COVID, like independence has been a concern. Like, can they work through these things? Can they get this done on their own? Being able to like monitor their progress is a big issue. So the important things to know about feedback is that it's always student-centered, and it's corrective and instructive. Feedback that is provided where it can correct something and help reteach or guide is the most important kind of feedback, and it's always about the student. So some questions that you want to think about, or when you're providing feedback and the kids want to think about, is like, where am I going with this learning? How am I going? So how am I going to get there? And then once I get there, where to next? This is essentially the why. Like, why am I learning this? Where is this all going? And then what's the whole process to get there and where to next? So really, kids have to know the point. Like, what's the point? They have to know the reason why they're learning this. And when we provide feedback through that learning process and let them know that whole thing, then they're more engaged. I don't know about you guys, but I really love having an agenda or a schedule, or even when I'm working on, I'm like 30 minutes. That's as long as I have to go, like this is all I have to do. Because when I know that there's an end to thing, or I know where there's a goal or a point that I have to get to, then I'm more likely to achieve it. But when I just don't know, or I don't know the why, I don't know where this ends, I don't know if I've met a goal, then I'm less motivated. Okay, so levels of feedback, there's effective and ineffective feedback. So let's talk about those effective levels. So task level, so understanding and doing the task. Feedback is given during work time, not necessarily during a lot of instructional time. There is opportunity for feedback during instructional time, but you're really giving those opportunities to respond in that piece. And then process level, so understanding the strategies needed to do the task. Self-regulation, so it's self-monitoring actions. Ineffective is self-level, so evaluative feedback about the student as the person. So not saying you're so smart, or you're a great helper. You're really looking at doing the task, the strategies to do that, and then having them self-monitor them. So does that kind of make sense to everyone? Like really moving away from that individual personality, and you're putting it back on their progress and their understanding of what's going on instead of them. So it's more on the what's happening that they're working towards. Is that a little clear? Esma?
Yeah. Like, I like the effort that you're putting into something rather than the person.
Yeah, it's into something. All right, if you guys have any questions, stuff, continue to use the chat. We can move to the next one. Great. All right, click. Oh, can I give Clea, which one to give an example? Because I'll probably get to some later. Oh, like the effort you're putting into something.
Yes.
So when they're working through, like, let's say they're working through a math problem. So instead of saying like, you're a really hard worker or you're working hard in this, you're sitting down and you're saying, okay, you've got this first part right. So you're affirming that they've got something correct. And then you're guiding into the next piece of like, okay, so you've got this right. So I've affirmed, and then I'm instructing. So what's the next process? So that would be a process feedback. What's the next step? Or what's the next strategy that you're going to use? So that's a guiding feedback. Or, okay, great. I hope that cleared some stuff up for other people too. Okay, so instead of saying like, you're working hard through this, keep it going, you're just being more specific. So effective feedback and how we use it. It provides clear and specific corrected feedback that verifies and elaborates. So that's kind of an example that I gave is clear, like you've added the two fractions together, or you've corrected them saying, remember, like we need to multiply them by 2 first. So you've corrected the strategy, and then it verifies and elaborate of what they're supposed to do next. Click. Provide corrective feedback that's focused on the task or process, not the learner. We kind of went over that previously. Provide immediate feedback, especially for struggling learners. So this is really important in, like, when we provide those OTRs, that gives us a lot of idea of where our kiddos are. But even with behavior, academics, and mental wellness, all those pieces, when we provide immediate feedback, our kids are able to take that and use it. But if we provide feedback that comes like the next day or in an hour or in 15 minutes, kids have kind of moved on and they're not going to get the same information that could have been provided in feedback that was more immediate. So it's very important, especially for your kiddos, for your struggling learners, because your struggling learners are very likely to disengage from instruction, environment, or even your whole school community. We know that our struggling learners have higher dropout rates. So it really is very important for immediate feedback. Next. Goal-directed feedback. If you're a special educator, which a lot of times we have a lot of special educators in our trainings. When we talk about, I'm going to connect it here, but when we talk about putting the grade level standard in our goal, we know that if our kid probably they're not at that grade level standard, or we probably wouldn't have a goal for them. We're pulling foundational pieces that they need to meet in their goal to get to that standard. So when we're looking at providing support for our kids, is they may not be working at the same pace to that endpoint, but you want to let them know, like, okay, this is where they're going. They're trying to achieve this piece, and then how they're going to get there. And then they know once they've met that goal, where they're going to next, because that's part of that whole guiding questions process. So instead of saying we have to learn this giant standard at the end, which is very important, you want to make sure that each of your kids know that they are making progress. And that kind of feeds into that self-monitoring piece too. So it provides opportunity to support them with that feedback piece. Next. Focus feedback on misunderstandings, rather lack of information. If you've provided the instruction to them, then they have the information and they're just misunderstanding. Not that they're wrong, not that they don't get it. It's just that they need more clear instruction or reminders or guidance in that area, not that they don't have all the information. And then consider students with developmental levels and abilities when giving feedback. So the feedback that you may provide to your highest kid in the class may not be the same type of feedback or guidance that you provide to a kid in the middle or a kid that's struggling at the end. And you guys will, you know your kids. Like once you start to work with them more closely, you know what their skills are and what they respond to. So being able, like cognizant of your students' developmental and abilities is very important. Next. In effective, we talked about this, the person-focused praise, go ahead. Avoid the use of hints that end with the correct answer. So saying like, you're getting closer, you're getting warmer. Those hints aren't helpful because it doesn't provide any corrective, instructive feedback or affirming feedback. It's just kind of like, we're gonna slowly get you there. And then here's the caution with providing overall grades. Going back to goal setting for each student of making their own progress to meet the final expectation, we have to celebrate our students' progress, and oftentimes overall grades, like if they get a D in math or a D in language arts, but they've made so much progress towards what the expectation is, that should all be celebrated. And sometimes that D in math doesn't reflect how much learning that they've achieved. So I know that providing overall grades can seem it's a weird area of conversation amongst schools, but just making sure that you're reiterating to the student of all the progress that they've made. Next. Do not use feedback that compares students to peers, like, oh, Johnny's got it, what, you should be here too. So just making sure that it's always focused on what the student centerpiece. Next. And then this, go ahead through. That one didn't get edited out. My apologies. All right, this slide is so important. So we're looking at positive feedback over a year's time. So when we think about positive feedback, I know that I was trained of understanding that it's 4-to-1, 4 positives to each negative. You might have been taught that too. And I've heard 5-to-1. Well, the recent research has come out is 3-to-1. It's a little easier for you guys to do in the classroom to provide 3-to-1. It's kind of hard to get to 4-to-1, and sometimes 4-to-1, depending on what your feedback sounds like, can feel like it's just overbearing. But when we look at the different grade levels of students, if you guys want to share in the chat, if you're elementary, middle school, or high school, that would be helpful. But elementary, the data shows is that they get over 3-to-1. So they're in the positive for 3-to-1. Middle school gets 1.74, so about half. So they're negative already, behind in the 3-to-1. And then high school only gets 0.65-to-1. So they're very behind in comparison. So if that doesn't sound that big, but as it goes over time, then we see a big difference. So elementary is in the positive because they're getting more feedback. Middle school is the gap is getting bigger over an hour. They've missed 75 opportunities for feedback, and high school has missed 141 opportunities for feedback. So when we talk about OTRs, engagement, and feedback, this is starting to all come together. So every day, elementary is in the positive, middle school is negative 375, high school is negative 705. Over a next month, elementary in the positive, middle and high school, the gap continues to get bigger. And then over a year, those numbers explode. So I want to take maybe 30 seconds or so. You guys can think about this, and you can unmute or you can share in the chat, like what is running through your mind when you see these numbers. You can even use an emoji.
Yeah. And you think you agree with it or not?
Yeah. Laura Mars got the sad face.
Yeah, my son's going to middle school next year, and I'm like, because elementary land, look how many positive, look how much interaction he gets, and then it goes a lot lower when you get to I mean, just the research, there's tons of research about it. OTRs decrease. High school sometimes go through their whole day without talking to their teachers.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah, a lot of the comments in the chat are about like how older students are not provided that much positive feedback. If you're a middle or high school teacher, your insight would be, if you want to share your insight on why you may think this is, that the kids don't have more opportunities for feedback or to respond. And Laura asked the question, like, how will they get motivated and engaged if they're not getting feedback? That is a huge piece of it. So this whole chart just kind of blew my mind, especially when you look at the middle and high school piece of the missed opportunities for positive feedback. If you think about it, like those elementary, definitely crucial years, but when we're looking at middle and high school and they're working towards those pathways to graduate and where they're getting that's a big time for them as learning as well. When they aren't getting that feedback, then their motivation, morale, their understanding of their learning is we're missing out on those opportunities to guide them and help them set goals for improvement. So just keeping that in mind when you're providing instruction, to try and really give those feedback opportunities for them.
Yeah, and I was in a middle school, and that was kind of our initiative because we recognized this. It was too much teacher-centered, and it was not enough student. So we did focus on that engagement because it is research-based and it closes that achievement gap. And I was in an urban school, so just focusing on that middle school population of, letting them do more groups and letting them have more dry erase markers and letting them respond more, because it wasn't really the shift we were seeing. And we saw some gains. It took us a couple of years, but we did see some nice gains. So it's good to know that it works in action.
All right, so this is kind of a big slide, but we really wanted to hit these key points, is that they reinforce expected behaviors. So demonstration, answer, and response. So it can be used all across like the whole child of academic, behavioral, mental wellness. So you can use that for all of those. It's corrective feedback is more effective than negative feedback. When I think of that in the classroom or in a school, so elementary, you've got a kiddo running down the hallway and you say, stop running. That is negative because you're telling them stop running. But if you're corrective, you'll say walk. So they know what they're supposed to be doing in the classroom. Oh, Tony, you bring up a great thing about the numbers earlier. I think middle school and high school teachers have less time with students and can have hundreds of students. Older kids still need positive feedback. You're totally right. And you guys do. You have tons of kids coming in and out of your classrooms every single day. But the thing is pulling these strategies or this understanding is good practice and providing that feedback. So while learning your kids' personalities takes a little bit longer than elementary when they're with the same teacher all day, you can still provide corrective feedback, or you can still provide positive feedback. You'll just learn if they just want like a thumbs up, or with some kids it probably needs to be explicit or specific. So learning about those kids. So it's all strategies that you can feedback or strategies that you can implement with all of your classes. But the more you get to know your kids, then you can kind of specialize it. But I totally get it. You've got kids cycling in and out all day. Fading out feedback or once the skill or expectation has been met. So you don't need to continue to provide feedback on things that they've mastered. You can always come through and it doesn't have to be specific or explicit and just be like a smile or a thumbs up once they've got it, but you know that there's something else that they're working on that you should need to be providing more explicit or specific feedback. Use feedback immediately. We talked about that earlier, especially when they're not fluent or they're struggling learners. It really needs to come back very soon so that they're able to, it's addressed, corrected, and guided. Negative feedback is punishment. Like it feels like when they're told no or stop or that's incorrect, it doesn't feel good. Like if you're when you sit in your evaluations, and if your principal or whoever's evaluating is like, you're not doing this right, that's feedback that doesn't make you feel great. But if you say, okay, you did this, you're on the right track, what would be a strategy to improve? And then you have that discussion, and then you have a plan of where you're going next, how you're going to get there, and you know what your goal is. So that feels better than just negative feedback. But like I said, it's typically a stop command, and it can be delivered in mild and an instructional manner. Best and most effective use of negative feedback is corrections. If you say stop running, then have a conversation. In the hallway, we walk. What do we do in the hallway? We walk. And then it should be in a ratio of 3 positives to 1 negative. So if you are stop running, you can immediately come in with, okay, walk, you're doing a great job walking. Oh, I love that you have a seatbelt and bubble on, or something like that, and provide those positive feedback opportunities. That reinforces that the student is doing the right thing, and then it builds their confidence, self-efficacy, and the relationship that you have with these kiddos. Next. So what do? We're moving quite quickly. Okay, so I'm going to give you guys a little bit of time to think too. Question, ask yourself, like, how do I know if I'm engaging all my learners? How do I know if I'm improving my practice? And then what do I do next to make sure that all of that is going on?
So we can ask you for a goal or something that you think that maybe you can tweak after listening to some of these things, or you can try something. I don't know if you know, or maybe if you saw one of those strategies that you didn't hear, that you didn't know about, the OTR strategies. If you could look, if you want to look it up a little bit further to use it in your classroom, you can put it in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and talk if you want.
Yeah.
We're trying to get some engagement. It's just for yourself, for your own, you know, we want you to get something out of this for your own classroom so that you could actually use it. You know, that's always what's so super important after professional development. So, you know, you can answer some of these questions, or thinking about something that you heard today that you can maybe start using or trying something different.
While you guys are thinking of that, one of the things that when we were building this presentation, we were trying to think of, like, how can we make sure that our participants are engaged? At least there's at least one opportunity that we know that they'll always be engaged. And last night I sent you guys a guided notes for you to use during this training. Guided notes are a great way to engage kids because it gives them kind of an outline of how to follow through what you're teaching. It can be, you can use them for all your kids. I know a lot of kids that have that in their IEPs where you can provide it to them, but it's a great way for them to help, if kids want to use it, to keep them engaged in the institution. So I don't know, Ray, if you want to put in the chat, if you used that today, it's totally fine. If you didn't, it won't hurt my feelings at all. But I think guided notes are super helpful, and we hand those out to this training every time we use them.
Yes, and we get good feedback on our evaluations that they like. Some people like those guided notes, so that's why we keep going. Does anybody have anything that you think that they can try, or how they know if they're engaging all your learners, or you think you do that most of the time anyway? You saw something that you liked, a strategy that's something different that you could think you could put in? Anybody? Not, that's okay too. You don't have to share, but we just want to give you opportunity. We just want to give you opportunities to share,
Yeah,
and learn from each other.
Yeah. All right. Oh, Kalea says she likes the guided notes. Also, she's used them for students. She loves that it keeps them on track throughout the lesson and also to study. Yeah, it's something that they can have, they can go back to. And then, like, even during your instruction, you can guide them or teach them, hey, circle this if you don't understand it, and we can come back and I can provide you more instruction on it or more guidance to support them in that area. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, or you can just give them your notes, like if students have a hard time writing, and then they can highlight words like Jessica said, or you know, concepts if they're not understanding that, because I know some kids have a hard time catching up and writing themselves, or spelling or anything like that, or they can draw pictures. You can differentiate that way. That's
Oh, Angela's going to focus on 3 positives, 1 negative. Angela, I think that's wonderful. And as we talked about earlier, how we don't want to bite off like too much that we can chew. So,
Right.
and we'll talk about this in a minute because it's going to move through it. But I want to say that that's a great thing to focus on. And then, but making, you don't have to do it all day to help improve your practice. We're going to talk about this in a second. So.
Yep. So we're going to just try to develop a plan. So when you're sitting here and thinking about it, do you want to focus on increasing your OTRs and your engagement with your students in your classroom? Or you can think about feedback with, like Jessica said, providing more positive, 3 positive feedbacks, so 1 negative every time. You can decide what you want to do for your classroom. So when I was a teacher, we had to record ourselves. My focus, my goal was to increase my high level questioning with my students. So that was part of our PD. We had to do that to improve our practice, which is fine because it made me a better teacher. So I just videotaped myself for 20 minutes. I went back and I saw all the questions that I asked and I saw which ones were concrete, which ones were higher level. And then I made my own goal. I made a goal. Okay, I have too many concrete questions. I want to do a little bit higher level questions. I'm going to add 2 more in. So that's kind of what I did. You can do the same thing. You could either ask somebody to come in. There's no sub, so no one's coming in your classroom, right? But have a coworker film you or film yourself, or look at your goals, look at what you need. What does your classroom need? If you have a class like a 3rd period and you're like, they're off the wall, like what, they're not engaged, they're all shouting out, they're all doing, how can we switch their seats? How can we group them a little better? How can we do some different OTRs? How can we try to engage them in a different way than, and refocus and maybe on just one class. So whatever you need is how you should plan this and to set a goal for yourself. We have a couple things in the chat as well.
Yeah, Tony shared that he's also going to work on that positive feedback. He was really shocked about how little positive feedback older students get. Yeah, that, like I said, that chart just like smacked me in the face when I saw it. So, and I think like going back to this plan that Alana is talking about and what Angela and Tony are talking about is that you're really looking at gathering some data. So filming yourself during a 15-minute period and focusing on that period of time, not trying to use, like, you can try and use it all day, but if you want to improve your practice, we know, like, I really want to focus on this time period or in this classroom, using this strategy, and then being able to spread it throughout your day. But trying to film yourself all day to see how your improvement is hard. Just working it into, okay, so I'm going to film myself on a Tuesday, and then I'm going to come back next week and I'm going to film myself again at the same time with the same class and look at my data and look at my improvement. I think that's just in little increments, because we don't want to bite off more than we can chew, because it feels very overwhelming.
And I appreciate how you already are self-aware that you know what you already need to look at or like think about because of the research or because of what you're thinking. So you already have a goal. So I just think that's great that you already are thinking about that. So
really
thanks.
Great.
That's, yeah, awesome. So there's some collection. I mean, if you are a data person, sometimes special education teachers are data. I'm kind of a data person. I think Jessica as well. If you want a sheet, you can make your own sheet. These are just examples. Again, they're in the Padlet. If you want to increase your OTRs, and if you think you only do think, pair, share all the time and you want to change it, move things around, there's some collection forms there that you can copy, you can make on your own Google Sheet. Doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be fancy, but just any way that you can see where you are now and where you're going to go, like, and have a goal for that. Some schools ask teachers to have goals. This could be like maybe a goal that you could think about and talk to your principal about, if that's something, because that will help your teaching. So we just gave you some resources for that. So now we want to check your cell phone bar status, since we're at the end of and we're going to kind of wrapping it up. So now if somebody asks you, can you explain OTR engagement and the relationship with engagement and feedback? 0, never heard of it. I hope no one's a 0. No one has any bars. To 5, I'm an expert. No, at least I hope you moved up in one of your cell phone bars. So if you can put that in the chat just for the end for us, that would be helpful. That's a post-assessment. So we did a pre-assessment. Great. Thank you.
Oh, so great. Lots of 4s. That's so good to hear.
I love it. So now you're comfortable using it. You can go back to your team and kind of explain it. Look at your lesson plans, help somebody else look at their lesson plans and kind of change it around. I love it. Thank you. Great. Everybody's a 4.
Yeah.
That's awesome. You're going to be an expert in no time, for sure.
For sure.
Sure, they are. Well, we
So
appreciate
the
your
last thing, oh, sorry, we do appreciate your time that you guys have spent today. We know that your time is very precious. So you're getting out about 15 minutes early. Sorry, our videos didn't work. And we
videos.
will make, yeah, we'll make sure that those are uploaded to the Padlet so that you have access to them. But we asked, because we need feedback too, if you will take the evaluation for us, so you can just scan your phone on that QR code. And then you can also register for more trainings. We do have a behavior training coming up called Beyond Treats and Timeouts, and it is fantastic. It's after school, which I know you guys don't necessarily want to spend time after school, but it's after school. And if you sign up, you can get the recording.
And it's
going to
free.
be really wonderful. Yes.
Yeah, just record.
And then,
you can get the recording and watch it later.
yeah. So if you don't mind, if you could do those evals, we really appreciate it. And I will drop the link for the Padlet in the chat another time, or again.
The
And
Padlet
then,
stays there, and we'll just upload like so we'll
Yes.
make sure that everything's up there. We're getting out a little bit early because of those video. I'm sorry, technology sometimes, and I feel bad about that.
we're not sure why that happened. But yes, the Padlet stays there. It doesn't, the only thing that happens with the Padlet is that we just add more resources. So you will always have access to that Padlet and the resources that are in it.
Yes. We have some books that we recommend, and if you have any questions, or if you have any, you can email us. You can, are we on the next, do we have?
Yes, our contact information is on, I think it's the next slide.
Yep, so you
So
can email either of us or call us, and we answer all the time. If you need any resources or book recommendations or any data sheets or whatever you need, we will be here for you. So we just appreciate
And
you.
not even, yeah, not even just around like engagement and feedback. Like, we are available for all kinds of special education, gen ed stuff too. Like, we're happy to help with those pieces, because we all know our students with disabilities are gen ed students first. So please do the eval, and then you've got the Padlet links, and then our contact information on that presentation. That's in,
And you'll get a certificate for your hours, your 90 minutes
Yes.
from Gail. So she'll send you an email with a certificate that you attended the webinar, so you'll get your points
Yes.
for that. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you guys so much. If you can unmute and talk to us, or you guys can go. Whatever you'd like. Thank you.
All right. Thank you guys. Have a great day.
Have a great day.